Hi companions, today we will make sense of an intense and wonderful film where a delightful spouse is compellingly attracted to a repairman to know where their enthusiastic undertaking leads them. Watch the full episode. In the start of the film we see Sonny Jordan. He is making a trip from one city to another looking for a task. He at long last winds up in Louisiana, as one of his companion vowed to give him a task there. He went to gauge, yet the proprietor says the opportunity is presently full as you are 2 days late. He searches for work however with no karma. He at long last rests at side of the road. Simply behind the street we see a rich elderly person, George. He is opening his card entryway. A mugger assaults him for cash. Bright comes at the right second and saves his life. George is extremely dazzled with him after first skilled at police enlists his wine. When his lovely spouse Larissa shows up, George presented her with Sonny and requests that he accompany him for supper. As they arrive at home, they eat. George tells him he has a carport in an outfitted space for him to reside. He believes him should work for him as a technician. Around evening time Sonny pay attention to their discussion. Larissa says we know nothing about him, how might we keep him here? George tells her he is simply allowing him an opportunity, as he likewise came here with void pockets. She concurs. Next morning George shows him the carriage. He let him know the work and shows him a redesigned vehicle. He says I can't track down the carburetor, I need to fix this vehicle. Instilled to Larissa. Bright begins his work immediately. Larissa appears to be a piece keen on him, as she takes a gander at him occasionally while he works. Bright is likewise seeing her step by step. Following not many days it turns out to be exceptionally obvious that she is really tracking down ways of checking him out. One evening when George is out, she goes to Sonny. She tells him if he need to work here, he should quit taking a gander at her the manner in which he does. He asks her for what good reason she wedded the elderly person. She says it's nothing of him should be worrying about. Sonny tells her, how would you be aware? I check you out. You should be taking a gander at me to realize that I am checking you out. She disappears. At noon the two of them gaze at one another while George recounts to them a story. After lunch George requested that he bring glasses so they can partake in some bourbon. He takes some ice for the beverage, and Larissa on the off chance that she is feeling hot too. He takes some ice 3D shapes and rubs on her to make her virus. She isn't opposing in any way. Around evening time Larissa can't rest as she is contemplating Sonny. Sonny have a thought. He looks for carburetor on the web and finds a shop away from home. Next morning he enlightens George, and he immediately goes out according to Sonny's arrangement. Larissa goes to Sonny and asks him how long George will remain out. He says basically for 2 hours. He contacts her with grimy oily hands, which make her white dress filthy. She in a flash gets the open door, and invests energy with Sonny alone. In her room she feels significantly better about what simply occurred between them. George returns, calls Larissa. He shows her his desired vehicle to gift her. Bright fixes the carburetor, and the vehicle begins. George has a good time with it out. When Sonny tells Larissa, don't act contrastingly towards me or George, as this is the obvious indicator that we are looking for trouble. She lets him know you made my dress filthy. He says call me next time so I can wash it. Larissa lets him know there will be no sometime later. Around evening time they drink together while George makes them a terrible quip. Larissa goes about as though she is getting irritated and gets out from that point. George tells Radiant about his dead child and gets profound. As George falls a rest, Sonny goes up steps to see Larissa. As he goes into her room, she digs out from a deficit and bounces at him, as she is wanting to make it happen. Next they discuss their lives. Larissa lets him know she was made around. George came here after his better half and child kicked the bucket. She snatched the open door and wedded him. She says she can take off with Sonny on the off chance that she have the cash. Next morning George takes Radiant out and show him a land he purchased. He need to construct a racetrack, kids park, in a specialist shop not too far off. It's his fantasy. He needs Bright to run the specialist shop. As Radiant clarifies this for Larissa, she lets him know this is the best an open door. This is all she needs. Sonny says this is George's fantasy. How might you receive him in return? She advises him to kill George, so they can be along with this fantasy. Sonny tells her she is genuinely terrible. He would rather not kill the one who was so great. Yet she somehow figures out how to convince him. Next morning George shows her the plan of park. She is extremely invigorated as this will have a place with her. She embraces him and gives him a kiss. Bright is watching it from outside and blowing up. Around evening time as she elapses by Sonny snatches her and shows his resentment. He takes her inside the workplace where they have a confidential gathering. Next morning Sonny gives a reason to George that he wants to return home for 2 days. George gives him a vehicle for excursion, yet he really proceeds to book a room in neighboring inn. After at some point, Larissa goes to meet him there. What's more, they again get to know each other, then they plan George's homicide. Sunny says we ought to design a mishap for him, that way we won't ever be gotten. Then, at that point, the development begins. George is occupied working while the two of them are occupied with one another. One morning he calls Larissa to show her something. He shows her a way, so she can come and pull the lever, which will pound George and it will be a mishap. Days pass and things go flawlessly for them. At long last the day shows up when they will execute their arrangement. Bright goes about as he can't open the screw. George goes to help him. He flags Larissa and she pulls the lever. George is dead and his hands are coincidentally squashed. He advises her to proceed to educate individuals. Prior to leaving he requests that she dispose of her blood-stained shoes. She washes them and wears the grimy shoes. She tosses them outside and goes for shopping. Radiant calls her according to plan and she acts well. Police illuminates her beginning and end and she goes about as she is profoundly harmed. Here official is thanking her, as she was wearing filthy shoes that doesn't accommodate her. Radiant and Larissa's looks for the shoes, they consume them. Analyst Crawford meet Bright and presents himself. Presently Crawford is after Sunny, keeping a watch at them full time. Presently Sunny attempts to draw nearer to her yet she is disregarding him. One night he goes to her without her consent. She says we can't do this any longer. However the two of them rehash it. Next morning, Crawford calls her and advises her to send Sunny, as they need to pose a couple of inquiries. While exploring, they asked him how might somebody pull the lever from a long way off. Possibly you got it done or the two of them did it together. They leave him for the present. At home Larissa inquires as to whether they have evidences. He says they don't have anything, that is the reason they forgot about him. Before long police calls her, and they currently need to examine her. She is apprehensive. She lets him know she is pregnant, which makes him profound. Around evening time, they appreciate with one another to assuage pressure. Next morning we see Bright co-facing his wrongdoing. He says I tied a rope in the liver and pulled it. She isn't associated with it. Larissa awakens and can't track down him. She doesn't know about his admission yet. He left her a letter making sense of, she ought to have no contact with him now. She alongside her forthcoming child should disappear. And settled someplace unobtrusively, she sends him letters consistently with photos of a child. That seems as though he is glad to stay quiet about it as she is dealing with his child. Here we see her taking photos from her companion. Really she was not pregnant. She said that since she realized he will admit, and incredibly for us, she was taking part in an extramarital entanglements with that mugger, who attempted to ransack George. It was her arrangement totally. The film closes here. I want to believe that you loved it, if it's not too much trouble, similar to, remark and offer the video with your companions. I will see you soon with another clarification. Fare thee well.